Sad from Loose Pixel, and today I'm here to set the record straight on the M2 iPad Pro with Apple Pencil Hover. Specifically from the perspective of a digital painter, concept artist, illustrator, film, gaming, that kind of stuff. I've been doing this for over 20 years, and I have been an early adopter of pretty much every piece of art tech since I've started my career, since graphics tablets, since digital graphics tablets became mainstream. And since I purchased this and I did my first impressions and unboxing, which you can check out right over here, I have watched countless reviews and follow-up reviews from amazingly talented, my favorite on the planet tech YouTubers, who I strongly feel, and this is not a hot take, have it wrong. I think they all have it wrong. Well, they have it wrong if you're an illustrator, if you're actually using this for what it's designed for doing artwork on it. Because a lot of people, Mark S. Brownlee included, stated, for obvious, understandable reasons, I don't know where the Pro is in the iPad Pro. And they're referring to the apps. Where's Final Cut Pro? Where's the desktop version of Photoshop? I mean, we've got the power. We've got the M2 chip now. This is overpowered. I don't want more power. I want better apps. However, I don't think that Apple's going in that direction. I really strongly feel they aren't. I think they're going more in terms of functionality. Because as far as the apps are concerned, for at least as far as digital painting is concerned, we have a very large selection of them that meets many different needs. And I don't think we need Photoshop because I think we have pretty much the equivalent on the iPad for much cheaper anyways. But it's the functionality that hasn't been quite pro yet. So in order for me to set the stage for why I feel that this iPad is the most exciting piece of tech for artists released since the dawn of tech for artists, this model specifically, I have to bring you through a little bit of a history lesson through the course of my career, and I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. I started my career between 20 and 25 years ago. And well, that was during the days of pencils and paper and scanners, and I hate scanners. There were no drawing tablets that were mainstream. They had been invented many years before, but they weren't mainstream at this point. And then shortly thereafter, I got adopted into the video game and film industry, where we started working on those old blue and gray edition Wacom tablets, those early mainstream ones, same ones we would have at home that we'd have at the studio. They were small, they were ugly, but they got the job done and we adapted to it. Then, as we progressed through the years, newer and newer updated models, different sizes, different features would come out over the years, better sensitivity, better pens, etc. And that was the main flow of things until the Cintiq, which I have one right behind me, right here, my thumb's touching it, okay? Cintiqs came out, which were pen displays. They would plug them into your computer and you could draw directly on the display. And this, when this came out, was a very big deal, especially when they became mainstream. And there were many different brands that came up with these early renditions of them spanning way before the actual Cintiq was released. But the Wacom Cintiq was where it started to become mainstream. The first ever Cintiq, I never worked on it professionally, was the 15X, I believe. I never actually used one. I've never actually seen one in real life. But then soon after, I believe it was the 12UX or something like that. I'll mark it over here. That came out, and that was the ones that we started to see in studios. And it was gray, and it had a stand that sat on your desk and a pen, and it was fantastic. The catch to these was that most artists could not afford them. They were several $1,000s, stand not included in a lot of the cases. So unless you were working in a studio where they could provide one to you, then you ended up working on a Wacom tablet, an Intuos, an Intuos 4, Intuos Pro, etc. And I have an Intuos Pro sitting right there on that desk with my Apple Studio displays. And that was just the way it was. You just couldn't afford it. It actually took me around 5 years to afford this Cintiq. I bought this back in 2015, and it took 4 jobs for me to get to it because I kept going through these roller coasters of employment until finally I had the funds to be able to afford it. It wasn't available to the average consumer, and for many people it still isn't, because these things cost $4,000 or $5,000, stand not included. Stand is another $1,000 for all of you people coughing at the price of a Studio Display XDR stand. Cintiqs have been doing this for years. So yeah, now fast forward. and something really, really exciting happens. Wacom comes out with their first generation Wacom Companion, which was an all-in-one PC computer with pen. There's a pen display, and you could hypothetically work with it anywhere. And it was beautiful. Even by today's standards, I still think it's a very attractive, visually attractive looking device. And I don't know how many laws and how many different countries I had to break, but I got one, and it cost me several $1,000s, a lot more than any iPad Pro I've ever purchased. And I was so excited to get this. It shipped. It took a long time to ship, and I finally got it. And I opened it up. It's got that nice felt case, and I got all the accessories together because I wanted to do nothing more than to take it to a cafe, sit in the park, put it on my lap and draw. The idea of being able to do that was just so enticing. So I got everything packed up and I went to a cafe, and it didn't take me long to realize that even though it was powerful and screen was great, it wasn't great enough, and it wasn't powerful enough, and it didn't quite do the job properly. I installed Windows, I go to the cafe, and I realize I'm in this tight space and I have to set myself up on the stand like that. And I got my pen here in the pen holder and keyboard. Well, I'm sitting cramped around other people at this little table. So I decided it's kind of like chairs, kind of like this. So I sat it on the armrest like this, and I'm kind of trying to set myself up with the keyboard here because I have barely any space to draw. And then I realized when I get everything set up, I can't quite get the screen to tilt in the right direction because I've got this big bright sun from the window shining and I can't see it. And the sun's beating down on it, and then the fans start going. And I look down, and not only is the screen glaring, but the battery's now drained to 15%. That took about 30 minutes to happen. And that's the time it took me to just set myself up. So I ended up having to take the power cord out, find another space to sit, wire these wires just so I could have myself connected. And by the time I had everything set up, and I've got this big setup around me with this loud screaming computer with a screen that I'm squinting to see, and I'm sitting there trying to draw, I packed it up and I went home because I realized that's not what this is meant for. Furthermore, forget about the idea of taking it to a park. Sitting out in the direct sunlight, not going to happen. The battery would last 2 minutes and it would end up cooking the thing. So I said, forget it. So as far as the Wacom Companion was concerned, it was an incredible innovation. Wacom have always been at the forefront of innovation in these drawing displays. But it was a Cintiq that you could take places. You could plug it in this house. You could put it to this room, that room. It was mobile in your house. It was mobile if you wanted to take it on the road and set yourself up somewhere, but it wasn't mobile in the drawing in public sense of the word, which is kind of why I wanted to get it in the first place. So 6 months later, I ended up selling it to somebody who was very happy with it. And then the next edition Cintiq Companion came out. I didn't buy that one, but then the Mobile Studio Pro came out, which was kind of like the real update. It was the updated version of the Wacom Companion. They just changed the name essentially. And more powerful, bigger screen, a little bit thinner, better pen sensitivity, really, really nice, but the same problem. It didn't solve that problem. It was just a little bit more portable, but it wasn't a public drawing device. So needless to say, back in 2015, when the first iPad Pro came out and hit the market, with the Apple Pencil, they both came out in 2015 at the same time. I was an immediately early adopter because look at this thing, okay? The footprint of the iPad Pro hasn't changed much in all these years at all. It's pretty much the same device. And the ability to just sit back and draw like this was a very, very big deal to me. And you could. And I got it, and it was beautiful, and I unpacked it. It's super light. Get the pen. I couldn't care less if the pen charged through the Thunderbolt port. Who gives a crap? People whine about all kinds of things. And I'm drawing in it, and the drawing experience was amazing. But then, well, I did what I usually do. I started to paint. And this is where the big difference happens. When drawing, it doesn't matter. You're paying attention to where that pencil tip is. But when it comes to painting, you're always constantly dynamically changing the size of your brush. This is something you're doing constantly. My fingers are always sitting on the keyboard shortcuts for brush size. So the inability to be able to aim and size and place my cursor interactively where my eyes are situated, the inability to be able to do this is a complete deal breaker for painting on an iPad. And I also have the iPad Air 4, which also uses the same stylus. And when I flip back and forth between Apple Pencil Hover and not Apple Pencil Hover, I can't even draw without it. I can't even paint without it. But drawing, no problem. So what ended up happening? Well, I ended up not using it is what happened. And I ended up several months later reselling it. And the same thing happened to the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. The new Apple Pencil came out. The new M1 chip came out. None of those solved the problem, despite being completely overpowered. But then, a couple of months ago, Apple announces Apple Pencil Hover. And I knew that was the reason why I couldn't paint on it. It had nothing to do with screen size. It had nothing to do with the power of the chip. It had to do with the lack of that function. And I immediately traded in my 2019 iPad for the 2022 M2 version. And I was an early adopter. I ordered it right away. And when it arrived, I installed everything and I started to draw on it and I went, oh shit, none of the apps support it yet. Okay. So I waited a week and thankfully, I tip my hat off to the developers of Art Studio Pro, one of my personal favorite drawing apps and painting apps on the iPad. Because one day I log in and there it is. I can see my cursor, I can scale my cursor. And to date, as of December 6th, 2022, the only app that has come out with Apple Pencil Hover is Art Studio Pro. I noticed that Procreate came out with Art Studio with Apple Pencil Hover, but the function of it is ludicrous because I don't know if this is their final version of it, but you can see your cursor and then when you bring your cursor down, it goes beep, 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 beep. Your brush tip scales for some stupid reason, which completely defeats the purpose. So forget about Procreate for now, but Art Studio Pro nailed it and they nailed it on the first shot and I started to paint. And then I kept painting and I kept painting. And then I'm about an hour into the painting and I realize I'm actually well into a drawing now. I might as well hit record and use this for my art talk because I do time-lapse videos for my art talks. And I kept painting. And then I decided, well, screw it. And I put on my AirPods and I swiped over and I opened Vati Vidya so I could start listening to him because I like to listen to him when I'm painting. And I start doing a screen recording and I'm painting in Art Studio Pro and I'm painting and I'm painting and an hour and a half has passed and 2 hours have passed and I'm sitting down and I'm doing all of this on my couch upstairs watching Ice Cream Sandwich and Terminal Montage and Jenna Marbles with my son Lucas. And the whole time I'm painting that week's painting and recording and watching content. And I ended up putting 2.5, 3 hours into my painting, sitting down on my couch in my house robe. And I realized I forgot the fact that I was working on an iPad. In fact, it was a more pleasurable experience working on my iPad than working on my $5,000+ Cintiq. And sure enough, the function of this has finally made this the game changer painting device for professional art. I have since been working, all of my personal work has been done exclusively on the iPad. I prefer working on that over working on my Cintiq because I can take it anywhere. Literally, in a cafe, lying in bed, watching TV, I can do this all simultaneously. What's really amazing is after 2.5 hours of painting and screen recording and watching content, I close the app and I swipe down to look at my battery power and I'm still at 81%. Apple, holy smokes. Like I said in my last video, I am literally waiting as of today with bated breath for the next studio display to be a pen display. Because when that happens, Wacom, you got to run for your money. I love you guys. You're the innovators, but Apple's right up on your tail. You better get working on that. Because if it works as well as the iPad, which I don't see why it shouldn't, and it has all the functionality, then this is an absolutely revolutionary device for digital artists. I am counting the days until this happens. But wait, there's more. Because there's having access, being able to see your cursor also gives you added functionality. If you check out this example right over here, you can see that I've connected my iPad via AirPlay directly to my Samsung The Frame TV. And there was a little bit of latency, there's a little bit of lag, so I ended up connecting it directly through my Apple TV instead. And there was little to no latency whatsoever. And now, because I can see my cursor, I can just sit my iPad on my lap like a drawing tablet, and I can use my big screen to be able to preview my work in large format. Or my personal favorite pro way of setting it up is I've got a glove, and just setting yourself up on my Kensington Studio dock, which I reviewed a couple of years ago. You can check this out right here. Sturdy, adjustable dock that sits nice and high, charging cables. I can connect this via HDMI. Kensington, if you're listening, I would love you to come out with a Thunderbolt version of this. So you can get it connected to a Thunderbolt display. That would be awesome. But HDMI is perfectly fine. Connected to my BenQ designer monitor, 32-inch 4K, which I just reviewed. You can check it out right over here. And I connect it via there. And now I can use this as an ergonomic tablet that's lifted off of the surface so that my elbow's not hitting the table. Nice and weighted. And I can draw on this, and I can preview all of my work on a 4K screen right behind me. That is, in my opinion, an entirely pro setup. It will cost you a pretty penny. The Kensington Studio dock costs a couple $100, but it's the best accessory you're ever going to get for an iPad, particularly if you're investing a lot of money and time in an iPad. Altogether, I can say with absolute confidence that this is the final update that has truly made portable, professional, reliable artwork for digital painters a real thing, where the battery life, the flexibility, the versatility, the functionality of all of the above have finally come together. And the last missing link to this whole thing was Apple Pencil Hover. Now that that exists, if you're an artist and you're looking to purchase an iPad, unless you're doing exclusively line art on your iPad, the one I recommend is the M2 2022 edition, specifically with Apple Pencil Hover, because that added functionality makes all the difference, in my opinion. And in my opinion, to all of those amazing tech YouTubers who I binge on every single day, I argue this is truly a real pro device. All right. With that said, thanks for watching. Happy painting, and I'll see you soon. Take care.